Hey everybody, my name is Bryan Banville. I'm the Career Services Manager at Learn Academy, which is a full stack web development boot camp here in San Diego. And I'm super excited to talk to you all today about our internship program. Learn has officially gone completely remote and virtual in the classroom, which has given our students the opportunity to start to learn and build a lot of those remote worker skill sets that sometimes are very hard to come by. And as a result of that, we are also opening up the opportunity to change your model as a potential internship partner for those who maybe have typical internships that are in-house and your entire team is remote, to talk a little bit about some awesome strategies about how to make that transition into a remote-based internship. And in order to do that, I'm super happy to talk to Adam Cuppy, from Zeal, which is one of our long-term internship partners. They have a very cool, unique model that they have office-based, as well as having worked remotely as a team for the last 7 to 8 years, and has brought that model to their internship when they partner with Learn. So I'm excited for Adam to share some great tips with all of you today about what works really, really well, and maybe address some of your concerns that you may have about having remote workers, including interns. Hey, Adam, how you doing?
I'm good, Brian. And yourself on this glorious day? I hear you have a very little one at home that's occupying all of your attention.
I do. She's very cute. She's laughing and giggling. She's at the 3-month mark, so I'm in trouble. But it's all good.
Perfect.
And you have a much older little one.
I do. I have an 18-month-old
Right.
that's learning words right now. And more specifically, she's getting really good at the word no, which is great.
That's what you want in an employee, right? You know, now you have you have some coworkers at home during this time, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
So Adam, I kind of want to just jump in. I would say that one of the biggest concerns most companies have of shifting their workers from on-site to being remote, regardless of if they're a full-time employee or an intern, is trust. Not being in the same environment can sometimes breed that level of distrust amongst people, amongst relationships that you have, and amongst coworkers. And so I kind of just wanted to lay that out there and talk a little bit about trust. And how Zeal builds trust with your interns and your employees as well, as you guys work both a remote model as well as an in-office model, and how that's been working for you guys during coronavirus.
Yeah, it is a good question. I think the question exists whether you're talking about interns or most team members for that matter. You know, there's degrees of trust. And more often than not, time builds more trust. And so it puts things in an interesting and precarious place because you're now working with people that you have you have had no time with. And then on top of it, they're also very likely quite junior. So then the question comes up, you know, how do I know that we're reaching the outcomes that we do have, given this very limited amount of time we have? Not to mention, we're already strapped for time and resources because we're now all working from home. We're not accustomed to that, and we're sort of juggling it all, right? So these are all very, very understandable concerns, and I feel lucky in the sense that our company has become very familiar with what it means to be remote. We started remote. We've always put being remote first, even though we do have physical offices that people come into optionally. And just in this last cohort, the internship of 4 weeks, the first 2 weeks were done in one of our offices. And then in one day on a Friday afternoon, I basically called it and said, no, we need to go remote. We don't know what this is all going to be. We need to keep everybody safe. So that afternoon they transitioned and we picked up right where we left off a couple hours later. And the remaining 2 weeks were spent entirely remote and it went great. With all that being said, the factors that really make the most significant difference come down to a few key things. The first is consistency. So we as a company have our fourth principle. We've got 5 principles that guide us. And I could go through those, but right now the most important one is the fourth one, and that is keep it simple. So complexity kills a lot of things in the world, and emotional complexity being one of them. But But the complexity of scheduling and the complexity of people, where and when, that in fact has an opposite effect than you might think when it comes to building certainty in the entire situation. And so part of the consistency that we look to maintain is that we have consistent times in which the entire project team, and in fact the entire company, get together for very short periods of time. And just in doing so, we create this kind of common heartbeat as an organization, right? There's this, even though we have people that are spread across the country and also predominantly on the Pacific time zone, by simply having a consistent stand-up time and consistent meeting times, that consistency creates a degree of accountability that doesn't require the concern of check-in, like, what's going on? Well, you know what's going on, or at least you have a high-level sense of what's going on. And people tend to be quite accountable to that. So those specific items are, first is to have a stand-up. A stand-up that involves everybody, that is open to everybody. If your company has a stand-up, include them in it. You can do the new faces model, which is what we do. So our first day of our internship is just them, and I'll talk about onboarding maybe a little later. But the second day, they're thrown right in. They introduce the entire company via the company-wide stand-up on Zoom. So they get immediately familiar, even though they're sitting in the same room with everybody else being remote, right? So from day 2, we'll call it, actual day 1, they get the idea.
Right.
And then we keep it that way as much as possible. So simply by making them feel like they're a part of the team in as much as we can, then it just simply creates that desire on their behalf, I would hope, to stay committed and stay accountable in that regard. And so if you can't do a company-wide stand-up, at the very least, do a intern team stand-up. Have whoever might be a representative on your team that's sort of like overseeing the internship, participate in that on the most regular basis, hopefully daily, but alternatively just enforce that they have a stand-up, even if it's just 2 of them or a few more of them, it doesn't matter, just have them do the stand-up. Give them a very basic structure, which we have a very consistent structure for our stand-up, which maybe we could go over later. And that alone is going to create that heartbeat moment that has some just baked in accountability. So that would be.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to say what's nice about talking about consistency. So one of Zeal's 5, that's great, is that our students are used to doing daily stand-ups. So that's something that we integrate in the classroom from day 1 as well. And the nice thing, kind of what Adam was talking about, is that Learn is very much willing to host and make a mandatory stand-up. If your company doesn't have a stand-up from a remote standpoint, we will host at least intern team, and we definitely encourage any of the mentors or people who directly work with them to join us for that stand-up. But we will make sure that at least our interns are meeting with a Learn representative every single day in order to practice that stand-up.
Yeah, that is way cool. That is awesome. Yeah, that's really neat. Yeah, the consistency matters a ton. I mean, I can't, I cannot say enough about creating consistent schedules, consistent structure, and just how it makes it so much easier for people to fall in line to that structure and therefore kind of maintain that accountability. What I've sort of discovered over, I think we've had 24 interns at this point, was that in the beginning, when we ran the internship, we were really loose with it, like really loose. And then we were very rigid to the point where we had somebody that basically was working full time with them for the entire month. And so we really sat on both ends of both extremes, right? We were rarely in the middle. And then we discovered, like maybe a third of the way, halfway through all the internships, that we found where that middle ground was. And I think the middle ground that worked for us, because we are a fully functioning team. I mean, running internships is not what we do on a daily basis. Like, we have very real commitments, like probably many of you listening or watching do too. Was the recipe was have these consistent heartbeat moments, and then have accountability and expectations bound to certain mentorship moments, and then effectively let them learn how to fish, right? Like, let them fish for themselves, because that's a big part of the learning as it is, right? Is just going through the process of trying something, getting frustrated, making the breakthrough, trying something else, getting frustrated. I mean, going through the cycle.
Right.
And when we were on that far end of the pendulum of being there 100% of the time, where we were basically felt full time and exhausted by it, we were doing
Right.
way too much. And we were just we were spending way, way, way too much time. And as a result, they weren't learning anywhere near as much as they could have been as a result. And,
Right.
the opposite end of that was when we basically said, well, you have 4 weeks, make something of it. We had the same problem. And so again,
Right.
when we found these consistent moments, it really made a massive difference and has ever since.
That's great. One of our other remote internship partners, actually, one of my favorite stories from a student came out of that, which was like, I got a message during one of my check-ins with the students and said, I'm not too sure how this mentorship thing is working out with our intern partner. And I said, okay, well, tell me a little bit more. And they said, I'm pretty sure that she knows the right answer, but she's not telling us what it is. And all of a sudden, she kind of just disappears. And I said, well, that's a really good mentor. Someone who's going to let you, I said, I bet the reason that she's walking away is because she trusts that you're going to figure it out based off of her interaction with you. And what was great is later that week, I get another message that said, we figured it out. We totally did it. This is awesome. And so I love that approach to mentorship, is that part of building that trust with our internship program, which is a part of their education, is allowing them to work through those problems themselves, while still being a present mentor. And what I mean by that is someone who's available to help people get unstuck. And sometimes helping people get unstuck is not giving them the exact answer, and like micromanaging their solution, but it's more about that macro of teaching and saying exactly what you said, teach them to fish, give them that little nugget of information that's going to get them from point A to point B. And all of a sudden, when you come back at the end of the week, they're already at point F, which is great. So I think that's really great.
Well, a couple of quick thoughts to the mentorship and some things that we have also done, now that I think about it, that actually were pretty low-hanging fruit because it was easy for us to do, but it was hugely valuable to them. And that was 4 weeks. And instead of planning, 20 work days worth of time, what we did instead was we defined what the goals and intentions and the learning outcomes for each week would hopefully be.
Right.
And we presented that to them during that very first day. So in our case, we pair program and we want to instill pair programming and practices for pair programming. We also want to instill what product management and project management look like in our process. This is a big part of what we want to instill for them in the internship. And so we outline those as different kind of high-level objectives for the week. What was really cool was that even though what they were working on a day-to-day basis was a project that they had a sense for what it was that they should be learning over this week, so they could effectively guide themselves at times in which we just simply weren't available, which was maybe half the time. We have run the internship, have had really fantastic feedback from them. And I would say that on average, we probably don't spend more than a total amount of somewhere between 10 and 20 total hours, people hours with them in that capacity.
Over the 4 weeks.
Over the 4 weeks. And I would say that adding to that is I think we go above and beyond even what's necessary. But I do think what is critical is more time is going to be required if the outcomes and objectives aren't defined, because they're more likely to end up lost. Like, I don't know what I should be doing. Should I just do the next ounce of work? Is that okay? Should I be progressing through it? These are all the big questions that sort of come up. So having that as kind of weekly outcomes and defining that up front and going over that with them, I think is really good, which I would imagine, I don't know if everybody does a one-on-one with them. I don't know do you all do one-on-ones with each of the interns as well? Is that how?
So we actually do. So every week we have a mandatory one-on-one with students, and that can either be, now that we're virtual, it'll most likely be more in person. quick check-ins at the end of every week with myself to make sure that they are staying on task, that things are going well, and we kind of have a series of questions to help standardize a little bit and to make consistent what we're checking in with. And part of those check-ins is also Learn also will check in with the internship partner at least during the first week and the fourth week, but we are very open to interacting with companies at the beginning of every week and either one, helping to set that schedule for the week. If that's something that the company is a little bit hesitant on, we can help understand the expectations of the interns and manage that a little bit. And that way that frees up the company to do more of the mentorship aspect rather than feeling like they have to take on the scheduling and kind of coordination of things. And we also at the end of the week, again, we check in with students to make sure that they're meeting those. And that's something that we can always provide feedback to the company of where they're at and those types of things as well. Now at Zeal, do you guys have someone who coordinates all of those like onboarding and schedule building, or how does that work?
Yeah, we do. So our director of engineering, or equivalent, we call them a director of consulting, but effectively it's a director of engineering or a VP of engineering. We treat him like an onboarding coordinator. So the most important few days are those first 2 or 3 days. Beyond that point, things can start to become less and less. You don't need to, what we found is that we don't need to commit nearly as much time at that point because now the ball's gotten rolling. But if we can't commit the proper amount of focus and energy and time in just day 1 and day 2, then it tends to roll into kind of ambiguity through the first week, which then goes into ambiguity starting week 2. And then by week 3, it's kind of like, well, I guess we're just waiting the time out, which is not what we want to do. So we have an onboarding coordinator, and their primary role is not only to make those people feel welcomed as a part of the team, but also just make sure that the little friction points, like have they been given access to the code? Have they been given access to all the tools that are necessary, whether it's the Slack accounts or the CI accounts or the hosting accounts? Do they have access to all of those things? And then if so, then making sure that they're familiar enough with how to use them so that, again, we don't run into these time-consuming hiccups 5 days later or 2 weeks later of, okay, well, I have access to that thing, but I just don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. The other thing that they do, which I think is really valuable, and that is they become that welcoming party to the rest of the team. So even though I know that our team is incredibly empathetic ambassadors and they're incredibly giving, as would I imagine you believe in your team, or I would hope so too.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's very common that folks just feel the friction, right? I mean, with our team, we're vast, many of them have written code for well over a decade, 2 decades.
Sure.
So they're very senior, very lead level. And then you take, you're an individual that's, been in a code school for 3 months, you're now coming into your internship. The likelihood of deeply embedded imposter syndrome is very, very likely. And so even if your team is just the most welcoming folks in the world, having that, giving ambassador, that kind of onboarding person that sort of welcomes them into the rest of the group, I think has a very lasting impact. And it encourages, I'd hope that it encourages those folks to be more engaged and more active because they feel more welcomed as a result of that. And so a simple thing that we do is they're not called interns, they're the internship team. So on our team, they're engineers, they're just junior engineers, they're just interning engineers, but they're not interns. And that simple terminology creates that, again, that environment that you're a part of this group, you just are in a limited capacity, and you come with a limited amount of experience. But other than that, you're part of this team. And so again, I think that the level of investment that ends up happening as a byproduct is huge, as a result of that.
Yeah, I love that. It's all in how you frame it to also the students who are participating. And if you're looking for that buy-in, whether it's from your employees or from your new intern team, treating them at the same level and same expectation as everyone else, not necessarily on the outcomes that they're going to have, but from being an active participating member of the team, I think is great. And that to me is what buy-in is all about, regardless of where someone falls on the org chart, for example. Now I'm looking at our time, Adam. We only have a few more questions. I have one other question that typically ties with trust, and that is security. So one thing is with a tech company is many of us are working on some exciting new projects with some exciting code base that we may be a little bit hesitant to be out there in someone else's home, maybe not in our environment. So from a security standpoint, what do you guys recommend as Zeal for how you would go about working with your intern team to ensure that security is in place for your technology and for the work that the students would be doing?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's really common for us, given that a lot of the tech that we work with as a company is extremely proprietary. So I would say that the stakes are even higher in our situation because oftentimes we're brought in at a time in which we need to deeply embed into their team. So we need to know certain things that are incredibly sensitive. And so there's always that risk that exists. The way we offset it as a company, so I'll first speak to that and then speak to maybe how we'd handle it with an internship. But how we address that as a company is only a few factors. So the first is we very readily sign a non-disclosure agreement. We have no intention to do anything malicious already, so it's easy enough to sign it. We, in fact, present that up front. So it's not something that they have to provide. We're willing to provide it signed. So it sort of illustrates our willingness to to treat their information in a very secure manner. The other factor is when I have a meeting with a new client and this concern comes up, I make damn sure that I convey the importance of that security to the rest of the team and every new person that comes on. I think a big mistake that does often get made is that we treat the topic of security and what and why something needs to be secured as secretive. That's the part that needs to be the most open. Is if you want to build trust, you have to give trust, but the trust you have to give up front is more about, this is why this is so sensitive. This is why this matters. And in doing so, by providing the why to the equation, it creates much more of a focus on kind of personal leadership and personal accountability to keep that stuff sensitive. Because even if you institute a security policy, like you're only going to do these types of things with this code and it's going to work this way, if there are edge cases in the situation, as an example, companies are experiencing this right now where they had everything physically in a building and then they had to take all their team members, move them out of the building, and now it's like, what now? In fact, we have a client right now who has a product that we work on that is worth many tens of millions of dollars, and basically their production has come almost to a screeching halt for this one reason. The problem is they can't afford for it to go to a screeching halt, right? So they have to institute a whole new series of policies around this dynamic that they otherwise would never have had to have. Now this goes into how we treat it with the internship. So I believe fundamentally that trust is earned. And there's this nice balance that we have to strike between earning trust and blindly giving it. And I believe that it's an incremental thing. So for us as a company, we don't start the internship by giving the interns access to all of the proprietary information in the company. But we talk in a very detailed and very open manner about who we're working with, maybe not names of companies necessarily, because I don't know that matters anyway, but more importantly, the nature of what we do and why it's so important that what we do is thought of in a very confidential and secure manner. That this is the livelihood of other people, not necessarily to some shareholders, but there are members of this team that rely on this company and these paychecks. And if we threaten that, we're doing the greatest disservice we could possibly be doing to those people and the company.
Right.
And I think that when we approach it that way, it kind of sets that groundwork.
So Adam, thank you so much for this awesome, great conversation and even better information that to share not only with the masses, but also to any potential internship companies that are interested in joining the Learn Internship. We're really excited about that. And the big things that I just wanted to kind of wrap up for us is really for remote workers and that building and establishing of trust. It's really important to be super specific and well-defined in your expectations, in the outcomes, have consistency when it comes to things like your schedule, your consistency in communication, whether that is through stand-up and check-in processes, which are both recommended. And then from a security standpoint, one of the big things too is to make sure not only to do the NDA, but to really build and establish that trust by being open and transparent, mostly focusing on the why things need to be secure, which I love that so much. Thank you guys for joining Adam and I. Adam Cuppy from Zeal can be connected with more on LinkedIn. And then feel free to reach out to me at brian@learnacademy.org for any further questions about internships. And we're happy to connect you with Adam as well if you have additional questions about how does this really actually work and get a little bit more down in the details. So thanks so much, Adam, for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I hope a lot of people got a lot out of this and have good remote internships. They work. They totally work.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Adam. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.